So, if you haven't heard of these JDM engines, you must be sleeping under a rock. We're talking today about the heart of your car, and the last thing you want is for it to go boom! So buckle in as we go over the best engines to have come out of Japan. And if this is your first time here, my name's Hatim Sharaf, where we're talking everything cars, baby. The Japanese domestic market has been known for making fast, reliable, and inexpensive vehicles. I mean, their technology is superb, their design has always been simple and straightforward, yet very effective. And because of this, we've been introduced to some legendary cars like the Toyota Supra and the R32 Skyline, just to name a few. Honestly, we gotta ask ourselves, what makes these legendary cars run so well? And the answer to that is some legendary engines that have made their mark. So let's waste no more time and let's get right into it. Number one, we got the Toyota 2JZ GTE. Almost any car enthusiast in the world is familiar with, or at least heard of, the legendary 2JZ engine. I mean, it's always been a special engine since its release in 1991. So what we have here is a 3.0 liter twin turbo inline six engine that offers 300 foot-pounds of torque and 320 horsepower straight from the factory. And again, this is from the 90s, so this is super impressive. However, the specs at the time were pretty cool when it came stock, but the tuning potential is what makes the 2JZ so awesome. It has pro motorsport teams still seeking out this engine decades later. It's safe to say this engine was insanely over-engineered and overbuilt for its stock output, and very few production engines before or since are capable of the sort of outlandish horsepower that you can unlock with such few modifications. So whether you have the budget to create a 350 horsepower car or a whopping 2,000 horsepower, you can at least feel confident that this is the platform to do it on. And if you need assistance along the way, you gotta remember, information exists all over the internet for any questions or problems you're gonna run into. There are tons of aftermarket solutions for this build. Number two, Mazda's 13B REW. The 13B rotary engine is one of the most incredible feats of modern engineering, with Mazda staying loyal to the masterpiece for over 30 years. And thanks to the rotary design, these compact engines can fit into the smallest engine bays and are capable of producing a mighty punch and making them immensely popular with tuners across the globe. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Mazda. At one point, they almost faced bankruptcy. So Mazda took an enormous gamble by launching the first ever rotary powered RX to the market in 1978. And we're so glad they took that gamble, because since then it's gone on to become one of the most highest regarded engine lineups in automotive history. And after reaching America in 1993 under the hood of the jaw-dropping RX-7 FD3S. It was the turbocharged 13B REW that would become the most sought after engine in the 13B lineup. And even though the 13B engine only had a 1.3 liter displacement, the JDM version still puts out close to 280 horsepower in stock form. And of course, this engine is notoriously famous for the amazing sounds it puts out. So it's safe to say, in the hands of a tuner, this engine can be easily transformed into a complete powerhouse. Number three, the Honda F20C. When the F20C hit the market in 2000, many were relieved that Honda had finally provided an exciting new FR prospect. Honda had opted for correct wheel drive combined with VTEC and a 9,000 RPM redline. Many knew that they were in for a treat. And until the Ferrari 5.8 Italia launched in 2010, the F20C had held the record for producing the highest specific power output in a naturally aspirated engine for 10 years. So making the most of the engine meant that they had to opt away from the typical variable cam phasing. And instead they went with a VTEC system made of two separate cam lobe profiles on the intake and exhaust camshafts and a unique VTEC solenoid. So since Honda released this engine over 20 years ago, it continues to prove its insane potential, with enthusiasts continuing to test the boundaries, going on to achieve more than 700 horsepower on the stock block. And it's not just tuners who make the most of what the F20C has to offer. With delivering almost 250 horsepower in its stock, naturally aspirated form, thanks to its ridiculous 9,000 RPM redline capabilities. So should you decide to pick one of these up, you'll feel confident in the insane aftermarket tuning community. Next up, we got Subaru's EJ25 Turbo. With the EJ25 Turbo design, they went with an unconventional approach. It's a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged boxer engine. So instead of the pistons positioned vertically moving up and down, they're positioned horizontally, moving opposite to each other. And because of how the pistons are positioned, these engines are shorter in height, which in turn gives the car a lower center of gravity. Now, the EJ25 has many versions depending on the market and year, but the power ranges from 260 to 300 horsepower, and it was installed in Subaru's performance rally car as well, the Subaru Impreza STI. This next one up is an absolute legend. We're talking about the Nissan RB26DETT. It's safe to say that perhaps the most talked about engines in the world are the RB26 and the 2JZ. The RB26, much like the 2JZ, is known for its durability as well as being purposely over-engineered. And if you're wondering what RB stands for, contrary to what many believe, the name RB is not rhythm and balance or raised bred. It's simply the engine series. 26DETT stands for 2600cc DOHC electronic twin turbo. Do keep in mind there is one very important detail that sets the RB26 apart from its JDM adversaries, and that is racing heritage. You see, Nissan developed the RB26 with touring car races in mind, and so it was intentionally over-engineered. This left plenty of headroom for greater output levels, making the inline-six powerhouse a treat for enthusiasts and tuners. The engine made use of cast iron block and aluminum cylinder heads. Weighing close to 420 pounds, the RB, despite having aluminum components, it was a relatively heavy engine. When it comes to why this engine is so iconic, you may get different answers depending on who you ask. But honestly, I reckon it's a multitude of things. You have the engine racing heritage, the tuning potential, dependability, and the absolute beautiful induction sounds that make the RB26 a JDM icon. If you guys are enjoying this video so far, please like and subscribe so I can reach people just like you. I would greatly appreciate it. Next up on our list is Honda's K20A. Honda is undoubtedly the king of 4-cylinder engines. The Japanese car maker has mastered the art of making naturally aspirated compact motors that deliver a heavy punch, all while being fuel efficient. The 4-cylinder configuration in general came about purely as a fuel-saving alternative. So while that is the main purpose of these engines, along with the low cost of production, Honda did a lot to spice things up. And one such creation was the K20 engine. I mean, this engine was the first in the tremendously successful K series. The K20 had a lot on the line as it was going to be the replacement for the highly acclaimed B series. It offered a DOHC configuration that included roller rockers on the cylinder head to reduce friction. The K20 engine also used coil-on-plug ignition coils, which was a step up from the B series. The K20 was the first of the 4-cylinder Honda engines to get rid of the distributor and use a digitally controlled ignition. The K20 engine, as its name suggests, was a 2.0 liter and was plenty powerful for a unit of that capacity. There are multiple versions that made between 150 to 221 horsepower. And honestly, the torque figures weren't too bad either, with all units producing between 131 to 159 foot-pounds. And of course, in typical Honda fashion, the K20 revved quite high. The most potent version, like the one found in the Honda Integra Type R, has a redline of 8,600 RPM. Now, keep in mind that these are stock numbers. What the K20 engine is capable of after modifications is even more impressive. So if you want to throw on a turbo or supercharger, you can do it. All right, next up, we got Nissan's SR20DET. When it comes to Japanese sport compacts, an engine's success stems from its design, performance, consumer embrace, and in our world, the aftermarket support. For Nissan fanatics, the respected SR20 engine is a 4-cylinder favorite. This versatile engine was produced for over 13 years in practically every configuration imaginable, from naturally aspirated and forced induction to all 3 driveline options, front, rear, and all-wheel drive. This engine family propelled 18 different Nissan and Infiniti platforms throughout the world. And of these, America only saw the Sentra, Pulsar NX, and Infiniti G20, which were all 4-wheel drive, naturally aspirated SR20DE engines. So at a time when drifting matured from an underground and outlawed style of driving in Japan to a mainstream form of motorsport in the US, American enthusiasts had a modest selection of Japanese platforms like the Supra 300ZX, 240SX, and so on. And of these choices, the 240SX offered an affordable, plentiful, lightweight, and balanced rear-wheel drive chassis. The US DM240SX came equipped with a naturally aspirated single-cam or dual-cam KA24DE. Engines that pretty much did not benefit from as much support from the aftermarket at this time. Fortunately though, since the 240SX is the same as the JDM Silvia and 180SX, a complete rear-wheel drive SR20DET engine, transmission, wiring harness, and ECU could be swapped with relative ease. And thanks to more than 2 decades of development and aftermarket support, there are still plenty of parts available for these engines. When built properly, the SR20 can reliably support more than 700 horsepower at the wheels. So for those seeking a reliable, cost-effective engine that is practically a drop-in for the S13 and S14 240SX, look no further, this is the one you want to go with. All right, moving on, we got Honda's B16B. Although more than 3 decades have passed since its launch, the B16 is still one of the greatest engines ever built. It pioneered VTEC and revolutionized the industry, becoming a favorite among the tuning community for its brilliant design and ability to produce an insane amount of power. This renowned engine was introduced to the general public in an era when Honda was by far the most successful manufacturer in Formula One. Some of the technologies and manufacturing processes pioneered on the racing machines found their way on the mass-produced power plants, such as the B16. This was all in thanks to a team of talented and dedicated engineers led by Yoko Kajitan. I'm so sorry, I probably butchered that. Now, this guy. Yes, this guy, okay? So what makes this engine so special? Well, they opted for a D-stroke equivalent of the Integra Type R B18 engine, which provided a new height of 212.4 millimeters. This additional space allowed for an upgraded crankshaft, pistons, and a longer light wheel connection rods, which provided a rod to stroke ratio of 1.85 to 1. Alongside these internal upgrades, they also adjusted the intake ports, increased the throttle body to 62 millimeters, upgraded the fuel injectors, added an improved exhaust system, and also installed a lightweight flywheel. That's not all. The B16B also had upgraded camshafts, lightweight intake valves, and reinforced valve springs. So with this significant revision and a new compression ratio of 10.8 to 1, Honda pushed out their most impressive power figures to date, with 185 horsepower at 8,200 RPM and 118 foot-pounds at 7,500 RPM. These innovations enabled Honda's legendary engine to withstand a lot of punishment, leading to bomb-proof reliability and exhilarating performance. For these reasons, it quickly became one of the most popular power plants in the tuning community. It can be turbocharged, supercharged, and there are even 11,000 RPM naturally aspirated builds out there. I mean, the B16 has been taken well above 1,500 horsepower, which is insane considering this is an inline-4 designed in the late 80s. So Honda's first VTEC unit deserves its place among the best engines ever built, as it revolutionized the industry and proved that small, lightweight 4 cylinders could deliver mind-blowing performance. So before we get into our last engine, I got a question for you. Out of all the engines so far, which one do you believe is the best one and why? I want to know in the comment section below. All right, we got the Mitsubishi 4G63T, a legendary power plant that debuted in 1987 and was produced for 30 years. The 4G63 has powered a long list of vehicles, including 9 generations of the famous Evo. Its origins can be traced back to the first turbocharged iteration of the 4G63, which hit the streets in 1981 under the hood of the Mitsubishi Lancer EX2000 Turbo. And despite its sporty front bumper at the time, the small 4-door sedan looked kind of uninspiring. But with 168 horsepower on tap, it could reach a top speed of 124 miles per hour. This fast little Lancer allowed the Japanese manufacturer to enter the World Rally Championship, laying the foundation for the Evolution program, which produced some of the most dominant rally cars of the 1990s, as well as a series of incredible road-going performance sedans that will follow. In its race spec, this engine could make 276 horsepower, but to achieve that output, engineers didn't have to perform extensive modifications. In fact, the rally car's 4-cylinder was very similar to the mass-produced variant. So this leads us to what makes the 4G63T legendary, its bomb-proof architecture. You see, all these engines had a bore stroke of 85mm by 88mm, a slightly underscore design that favored high torque delivery and fuel efficiency. And although many car makers were starting to build all aluminum units, Mitsubishi chose to continue using cast iron for the block. devised to offer supreme reliability. It was extremely thick, a construction that enabled it to withstand almost 10 times the power produced by the EX2000 Turbo. I mean, the same principle was applied to the forged steel nitrate coated fully counterweighted crankshaft, another component that was grossly over-engineered and nearly indestructible. So, decently powerful and ultra reliable in its stock form, the engine has fascinated car enthusiasts from the start. Many aftermarket manufacturers began to produce upgrades for it, and without tinkering with the internals, 350 to 400 horsepower builds became more common. Of course, some didn't settle for those numbers and proceeded to replace the con rods, the pistons, the cams, or the turbo, which resulted in more than 600 horses. It is without a doubt Mitsubishi's most successful power plant and one of the best performance-oriented four-cylinders the world has ever seen. So hopefully now that you know about the most legendary JDM engines, maybe you'll throw one of these in your car. Make sure you guys also check out this video where I went over the 10 most legendary cars that were actually banned from the United States, which is unfortunate for some of us. But again, my name's Hatim Sharaf, where we're talking everything cars. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. And again, make sure you check this one out if you like this video. I'll see you in the next one.